Well, how many brought your Bibles to church? If you did hold them up, I think this sermon will always make more sense when you can follow along in your own Bible. And let's turn in those to Jeremiah chapter 18. Jeremiah 18. Penny Reno and I have a channel on our TV called HGTV. And from time to time, we'll watch, I don't know, what do you call it, maybe home renovation shows? Is that probably what you call it? How many have watched even that kind of thing? You understand what I'm talking about. It's extremely interesting. Kind of a good show even to have playing in the background without any sound. But in addition to being interesting, sometimes it is downright shocking. Because frequently the renovators will step into this old, rundown house, the kind everybody else has given up on, and after they walk through every room and the attic and the basement and check out the foundation and all, sometimes after all that, they will talk amongst themselves and someone will say something like, "This place has great bones." Meanwhile, everyone watching at home who has been looking at the exact same thing is thinking, "This house has raccoons." Because literally everything about the house screams, "Tear it down." They see possibilities. They see potential. They see what the house could become. In fact, listen, a lady on one of these shows said something interesting. She said the biggest difference between her and everyone else, with all the warped floors and the pipes and all those things going wrong, she said the biggest difference between her and everybody else wasn't what she saw, it's what she refused to see. She refused to see a lost cause. She refused to see something beyond repair. She refused, where everybody else saw reasons to quit, this woman saw reasons to keep working, and it pretty well sums up one of the biggest differences, I think, between us and God. And that is, where we see brokenness, He sees potential. Last week I began a sermon series called Hard Doesn't Mean Hopeless. And I preached an entire sermon based on banana bread. In particular, how bananas are almost rotten. That's the key ingredient to making this wonderful end product. It was based on the Old Testament story of Joseph, which ends at the end of Genesis. Joseph looking back on his difficult life and realizing that the very things meant to destroy him, God used those same things for His good and to accomplish His purpose. If you missed that, you can watch it online at hopecca.com. But today I want to take that idea one necessary step further. Because after last week, I suppose someone could easily walk away thinking, okay, I understand that God uses hard things, but what about the damage those hard things leave behind? What about the regrets? What about the scars? What about the parts of my life that don't just feel difficult, they feel broken? Because of that, I'm damaged goods. And really, isn't that one of the greatest fears people carry through life, the fear that we've become a lost cause? Not outwardly, of course. I don't think anyone would walk around saying that. But underneath the surface, don't people sometimes think, I have messed this up too much. I've failed too many times. I've wasted too many years, made too many bad decisions, accumulated over time too much damage. And maybe that's exactly why Jeremiah 18 is in the Bible. Because this Old Testament prophet himself needs to learn something that's important to God. Not while sitting through a lecture or reading a book. By the way, a couple of years ago, I, on my Kindle, went right from a Stephen King book. They suggested another one, so I just went right into reading that, and it's a fantastic book. And I truly was halfway through the book when I realized this guy's father and mother-in-law go to our church. Seth Overton is the author, fantastic author, and Jerry and Elaine Myers, that's their son-in-law. I'm going to have them get a Sharpie and highlight my Kindle perhaps sometime. But no offense to writers or people like Seth, but there are some things people don't learn simply by reading about them or hearing about them. And what God does for Jeremiah here is he says, I want you, Jeremiah, to go somewhere and see something. And what he sees changes everything. Jeremiah 18, starting at verse 1. Your Bible says, the word came to Jeremiah from the Lord, go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you my message. I love that because as a pastor, I understand sometimes truth is easier to understand when there's an illustration, when you can see it. So God says, I want you to go. I want you to observe, pay attention. And so Jeremiah gets up from there, walks down to where the potter lives. And as Jeremiah watches this, he discovers something that every one of us needs to know. Not just when life gets hard, but when life has left a mark. Verse 3, he writes, so I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. You know, they probably had a kick plate and that wheel. Said, but the pot he was shaping from the clay was damaged. It was marred in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as seemed best to him. I get a kick out of this because if this were my pottery project, I did something like this in junior high, and the whole thing would take about 15 seconds. Step 1, the clay gets messed up. That's the easy part. Step 2, I get frustrated. Step 3, I throw it against the wall. Step 4, the end. Is there anybody else like that? Because sometimes I don't have a lot of patience for projects. Sometimes. But that's not how the potter operates. How he reacts when it doesn't work out the way he planned. Here he is working on this clump of clay. When something happens, he dings something, there's a problem, something goes wrong. And what does the potter do? He keeps on working. That's the detail Jeremiah notices. The clay gets messed up, or damaged, or marred in some way. The potter's not defeated by that. Something doesn't turn out right. Potter's not finished. He doesn't walk away. And that's the lesson. Because most, if not all of us, know full well what it feels like to be flawed. Or to feel flawed. Some of us are carrying scars today from things done to us back there. Some are carrying scars from things we did ourselves. Right? Sometimes we're victims, but sometimes we're volunteers, and we are where we are. You know, it's our own dumb fault. But either way, we all have damage of some sort. I expect some of you are carrying today wounds from your childhood. Some of you are carrying regrets from your 20s or 50s. Some of you are carrying decisions you wish you could take back. Some of you are carrying hurtful words that were spoken to you. It may be decades back, and yet you just keep replaying. They just still echo in your head. And the enemy loves to take those things and convince us that we are finished, beyond repair. That somehow everybody else is the nice, shiny pottery on the shelf while we're the ugly, cracked piece that's sitting over here in the bargain bin. But that's not what Jeremiah sees. Jeremiah sees damaged clay in the hands of a determined potter. And those are two extremely different things, because the most important part of the story isn't the condition of the clay. It's the location of the clay. The clay is still in the potter's hands. And that changes everything. Isn't it true that most people are pretty good about describing their damage? Spend enough time with most people and they will eventually tell you. They'll tell you about the divorce. They'll tell you about the betrayal, about the bankruptcy, about the addiction, about the diagnosis, about the moral failure, the disappointment, the thing they wish had never happened. We're just good about identifying the damaged parts of our lives. But in what we're reading here, Jeremiah is not drawing our attention to the damage. He's drawing our attention to the hands. Because as long as the clay remains in the hands of the potter, the story isn't over. And maybe that's exactly what somebody needs to hear today. You may not like where your life is right now, or all you have been through. But if you're still in God's hands, the story isn't over. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. We think the damage gets the final word, and God says, oh, no. I get the final word. The condition of the clay doesn't determine the future of the clay. The potter determines the future of the clay. And so there, as he's peeking in, what Jeremiah is watching, that's not a finished product. He's looking at a work in progress. The potter isn't discouraged by what the clay looks like right now. We tend to see our past. God sees our future. We think about our failures, and he's focusing on our purpose. We think about all those things that have been lost, and God sees what can still be built here. And I think it brings us to one of the best truths in the Bible, and we read it there. It's Jeremiah. It's verse 4. It says, "So the potter formed that clay into another pot, shaping it as seemed best to him." If you're looking at that verse right now, I want you to notice it doesn't say he patched it up, or that the potter hid the flaws, or that he pretended the damage wasn't there, not going to look at that. It says he reshaped it into something new, as the one who knows what's best for you and everyone else. I think that's why some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are ones who have survived some really hard times. Some of the most compassionate people you'll ever find are people who have experienced really deep pain or disappointment in their lives. Some of the most effective servants for Christ are people whose lives didn't go according to the plan. And God didn't just restore them, he reshaped them. I want you to picture a great sculptor, some guy, Michelangelo, say. Now, people love the finished statue. One of our trips needs to be going to the Getty Center. They have statues there? Yeah, it's fantastic. Whole bunch, okay. Are there any paintings? Okay. But people, they go to the statue and they point at the statue and they take pictures of the statue. Get a selfie, get a little selfie action here. But when the sculptor is just starting in or anywhere in the process with this big block of stone in front of him or marble, nobody hangs around to watch the 1,000 times he hits that thing with a hammer or a chisel. Nobody looks around and admires the dust. And nobody's taking pictures of the chips when they fly off, when the workshop looks like a catastrophe. Oh, they admire the finished work. But the finished work only happens because of the process. And sometimes in our lives, all we can see is the dust. All we focus on the things that have been chipped away. The things we're disappointed about. The things that have been taken from us. The relationship. The dream. The sense of comfort and safety. The path we thought our life would follow, but God sees something entirely different. He sees the work He is still doing now. He sees, like the sculptor, He sees the beauty that isn't visible yet. What He's reshaping this mess into. Do not judge the clay, friend, before the potter is done. Because God never abandons a project halfway through. We do. I know I do. Start things all the time that I just never get around to finishing. Anybody else have some mess in your house or some project that was supposed to take a weekend? A weekend back in 2017? We are very talented people when it comes to abandoning projects, aren't we? But God's not. When He starts working, He keeps working. When you look at the Bible, aren't you encouraged how much God uses imperfect people? Abraham was a liar. Moses was a murderer. David committed adultery and was a liar and a murderer. A threefer. Peter turned his back on Jesus. The apostle Paul, who wrote so much in the New Testament, he's a guy who was in a position and he had Christians put to death. The Bible is just basically one long story of God doing amazing and wonderful things through very ordinary, very flawed people. In fact, as I was working on this, I got thinking that some of the greatest stories in this room are stories of people God refused to give up on. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because there was a season in your life when you were running from God. Or when you were dealt what at the time just seemed like a pretty lethal blow. Or you were disappointed in Him, thinking, geez, come on, when's this all going to stop? But all the while, He kept working. Kept shaping, kept pulling you back to Himself. Do not give up, because there will come a time in this life or the next when you'll look back and so clearly see God's fingerprints all over your story. And what a day that will be. Or maybe you're already there to a degree. And you're already realizing that, you know what? I look at the disappointment or train wreck or whatever of my past, And through it all, I can see that my God was at work the whole time. He never let go of me. He never let me fall to my discouragement. Not because you are such an amazing clump of clay, okay? You're not. I'm not. But because he is such an amazing potter.